In 1954, the United States Supreme Court initiated school desegregation with the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Once the principle of separate but equal was declared unconstitutional, the North Carolina legislature and voters across the state approved the Pearsall Plan. This plan was designed to slow the pace of desegregation and was often referred to as the Freedom of Choice Plan because it required parents to seek transfers for their children to attend schools that had formerly been for students of another race, and to justify the reason they were seeking the transfer. Chapel Hill received its first request under the Pearsall Plan in 1957 when African-American parent Preston Weaver sought a transfer to the white Chapel Hill Elementary School on the grounds that the school had superior facilities for art instruction. The school board denied his request, calling the reason for the request inadequate. In 1959, Reverend John R. Manley became the first African-American elected to the Chapel Hill Board. He commented on his treatment at that time.
I would say first that I was respected but not accepted. When we were looking for a new site for the high school, the school board asked me to ride with them out on Piney Mountain Road. We got about halfway out there. I was told that we were looking for a site for the new high school. It seemed very appropriate because Estes Hills was on the other street, and there was Philip Jr. right there close by. So it looked very appropriate from the educational perspective to put the high school there too. Although they could have put it on Estes Drive, they didn't look for Estes Drive. They looked for the land that was owned by blacks. And I asked the question if indeed they were thinking that the blacks who owned that land for about many years would want to sell it. I was told by a member of the school board that they didn't have to sell it, we could condemn it. I opposed the condemnation of it because it was a place for residential development and where blacks could only find a place to live at that particular time and develop. I was given the responsibility as a compromise to find a new site. And I looked for a new site, and the short of the long story is, I found 100 acres of land owned by one of my members who were heirs of Reverend B.F. Hopkins. We bought that land for $1,000 an acre. It was undeveloped, and of course we put the school out there, and now we have two other schools out there, Chapel Hill High, Sewell School, as well as the Smith Middle School, and still land available for more development. So that was a respect, I think, to ask me to find something that they didn't find. At the same time, it was tension because the fact that they had left me out of the loop, and then when they found out that I was prepared to oppose it, I don't just vote against it, but actually work against it. They sort of gave me the respect to sort of get the situation.
Following another denied transfer from an African-American student named Stanley Vickers, the Vickers family sued the school district. Vickers won this suit. Reverend Manley recalls his involvement in the Vickers case.
And as the court proceedings went forward, the lawyer for the board came to me, his name was Mr. Edwards. He said, now, J.R., you know, I would be glad to represent you too if you would change your vote from the votes you made in the school board. I said, Mr. Edwards, you know very well I'm not going to do that. He said, well, thank you very kindly, and I will take all the rest of the members in the back and explain to them so that you would not be a part of the discussion. I said, thank you very kindly. When he went back there with all the rest of the board members except myself and I think Mr. Dean Brandeis, I go up to the lawyer for the federal government and tell the lawyer, here's a question you need to ask that guy when you come back on the oath. And when he came back and asked the guys on the oath, they lost the case because they knew very well if they had lied on the oath, they would have been messed up. They lost the case. And they lost it because some of us were not on board with that situation. But we also worked with the opposition, namely the lawyer for the federal government who was down here testifying for what's name. They lost the case. You don't hear anything about that.
In July of 1961, the Chapel Hill-Carrboro City Schools became the first district in the South to approve, in the absence of a court order, a plan for assigning African-American students to schools on a geographic basis rather than a racial basis. Reverend Robert Seymour recalls the community's involvement in this historic issue.
an organization that came into being in the community that was very helpful, offering support and positive proposals to the school board, was called the Fellowship for School Integration, pulling people from various places in the community who wanted to see this happen, but who were frustrated by an inability to know how to get a handle on it. This group was a very liberal group, a group that pulled people from many of the churches of the community in a way that spared the churches from having internal conflicts over this issue. The Fellowship for School Integration was a wonderful idea to avoid much of the controversy that was occurring in Chapel Hill, because the school board was dragging its feet and not moving forward with all deliberate speed. This also was a gift to the churches of Chapel Hill, because the integration of the school was fragmenting many of the congregations in our community. At that time, Chapel Hill was a very southern town. And by having the Fellowship of School Integration, those who wanted this to happen were able to work through the fellowship rather than through their local churches. And I think that history will show that this group had a very positive effect on accelerating the process toward the integration goal.
This was not the end of the challenges of local school integration, however. Students, faculty, administrators, and parents continued to struggle with the loss and/or merger of school traditions, demotions of former leaders of the all-black schools, continued individual prejudices, and fear of the unknown.